Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Game On. I am Justin, as many of you know. I don't currently have my partner in crime, Matt, with me, but I have another partner in crime with me tonight. He is right here. His name is Josh, and he is going to talk to us about Call of Cthulhu because he is awesome like that. Introduce yourself, Josh.
Hi, I am called Josh, as you've been previously informed of. I'm just a fellow gamer, content creator, and a host of other things, but mostly that's what you need to know for what we're talking about right here. So,
Yes, and speaking of content creator, Mr. Josh, you are the so I'll let you explain it a little bit, but I want to preface this with you are the only Let's Play podcast that I actually want to listen to. Because I don't have a whole lot of
so
time to like listen to like people play. Because of what I do, I just listen and I'm in the news with D&D and all the other RPGs so much that like I just don't want to sit and listen to people play. But I want to sit and listen to you
sure.
guys play.
Well, I'm humbled by that because yeah, we're just getting our start a bit. So that's awesome to hear. But there's a lot of really good ones out there. So which
Well, tell us
I'll talk
about
about
your
a little bit in a
podcast
bit.
if you don't mind. Like what
Sure.
is your podcast and what's it about? And give us a little give us more than an elevator pitch. I have some friends who are
Sure.
watching this who really want to know about
Okay. Excellent.
it.
Well, the so my podcast is called the Eldritch Hour. We are a tabletop RPG actual play podcast. We're focusing primarily on Call of Cthulhu 7th edition. And we're going to dip our toes into a lot of other systems, but always keeping a center on horror and mystery atmosphere. So, and that's the elevator pitch. So now I'll talk a little bit more. I actually was inspired to do this by listening to other actual plays, but also really because I've always liked being able to contribute something to a community of hobbyists that I'm a part of. So I'm a creative soul. I love to create in many facets. I got my start with drawing and painting, got my degree in photography, and but I love storytelling, I think, more than anything else. And my history with RPGs is actually very, very shallow. I really didn't get my start in role playing until about 3 years ago. And the whole time I've been almost exclusively GMing. I've been a part of one other campaign on the side with some friends that I get to play in. But I picked up Call of Cthulhu and just fell in love. So, and ever since then, I've kind of been dying to just tell cool horror stories to the world. Whether or not anybody else wants to listen, I just like to make things. So, this podcast is an outlet for me to do that. And I've got some really great friends that are excellent players, and we're having a blast so far.
Awesome. Is this well, I think I might know the answer, but for those who haven't listened, is this a homebrew? Is this a module, or is this a combination of the two?
Let's go with option C. It is, in fact, it's very much based on a pre-written module titled "The Star on the Shore." It was written by Ben Burns, published by what was Dark Cult Games, now is New Comet Games, but licensed by Chaosium for their 7th edition Call of Cthulhu line. It was a Kickstarter way back. I found out about it actually very recently, right before the start of the podcast. And I like to think of it more as a setting guide
Yeah.
rather than an actual
Okay.
scenario. It certainly has an underlying plot, and there's like antagonists, and it comes with pre-generated characters and such, which we ended up not using. But I kind of took that as just to run with, and then I've definitely embellished over the top of it, changed things, as most GMs and keepers do with this sort of stuff. If you want to keep things really interesting for your players, you got to make stuff up, and I couldn't help but do that because I love to make stuff up. So
Yeah, I remember listening to the first episode, and I'm not going to give anything away, but one of the NPC characters said a couple of location names, and I was like, uh-oh, the players are in for a wild ride, because I was like, I think I know where this might be, maybe?
I won't spoil anything for anybody out there that is interested in getting into the game at all if you haven't, and certainly, obviously, I don't want to spoil the podcast, just go listen to it if you could.
Yeah,
but
I'll link to it in the pinned comments.
The scenario that I'm running was written as kind of a spin-off, or not official sequel, but like an attachment to a very popular kind of basic Call of Cthulhu scenario known as The Haunting. And that's all I'll say. There's some tie-ins, maybe with some locations and other things, maybe some characters that you could absolutely attach the Star on the Shore to after running The Haunting if you wanted to, or maybe, as I'm doing, go to The Haunting later. So
that's what's really cool about the Call of Cthulhu modules, is that you can just kind of make them all work together if you need to. So
oh, absolutely. Yeah. I love that. Obviously them keeping like Chaosium keeping a lot of stuff in their classic 1920s setting. You kind of get to just factor in anything you want at whatever spot if you want things to go like run into a certain story. Like you can take something that maybe it's written as, oh, it takes place in 1924, and then the thing you're running now takes place 2 years after that. But if you really want it to just take place 2 years after that, just slot the other thing in after,
of course,
because it's all in the same setting. So no, they've done a really good job at keeping everything well contained within each module, but also open enough that you could absolutely just stitch together your own Frankenstein campaign if you want.
I love it. And what's really cool about your podcast is that, well, I've put out some videos where I talk about, using the resources that you have. So if you have the ability to use sound effects and music, use it. And when I was listening to you guys, it sounded more like a radio play, than it did sound like you guys were just sitting around the table playing a game. So I really like that you guys. I didn't mean to cut you off there. I really like that you guys use sound effects and stuff.
Yeah, no, thank you. That was something going into the idea of making the podcast that was way at the forefront of my mind. Like I knew right away before anything else, besides we're running Call of Cthulhu first before anything else, I'm adding sound effects and music because I really wanted, for me, music is such an integral part of my life, and very integrated into everything I do, and especially in gaming. Like there's so many good, usually when I play like physically at the table, I'll just like play my favorite horror soundtracks in the background, but I'll like curate a playlist for like whatever scenario I'm running or things like that. But obviously I can't do that for legal reasons in the podcast, so I make my own music for all of it. And that's another creative outlet for me. I love to produce like ambient soundtracks and horror soundscapes and things like that. So it was another way that I could kind of combine two passions at once. So
I had no idea that you made that music. Oh, you're pretty good at that.
Thank you. Thanks. I have a lot to learn, but I'm enjoying what I'm doing so far. So thank you.
I like it. So what got you into the Lovecraftian mythos in general?
Spoilers for your viewers, you gave me this question ahead of time to think about, and I've been thinking about it all day today. And I can pinpoint the moment that I discovered Lovecraft. I'm not sure I can pinpoint the moment that everything sunk its teeth into me, as it were. But I was walking through a bookstore. I believe it was Barnes and Noble. Could have been Borders. Those don't really exist anymore. But that dates me a bit.
Borders. What's that?
But yeah. But I was walking around. I'm pretty sure it was a Barnes and Noble. And in my youth, I had grown up on a lot of Poe. I love Edgar Allan Poe. I've read all of his works. Not for some time now, but a lot in my youth. And I just was walking through aisles, I think waiting on my parents or something. And I stumbled through the horror section, just looking at stuff. And I found a small compendium of a few of Lovecraft's works that on the cover had this tagline saying like that he was the 20th century Edgar Allan Poe. And I was like, all right, sure. And so I picked it up and I thumbed through and I was like, I just read a few lines at the beginning of a few stories and I was like, I want to buy this. I'm buying this. And read it. And I did fall in love with Lovecraft's work then, but I didn't really make it, or like it didn't really become a central focus of mine in a lot of my creative outlets till much later in life after that. And I think kind of the thing that I've zeroed in on was actually the last few years I've been really into board gaming. I've always liked board games, but really become a part of the hobby now, as it were. And one of the first very large scale games that I've ever played was Eldritch Horror. And I think that was kind of the rekindling of the fire for Lovecraft in me. And then, so for the past 5 years, I've just been like riding that train really strong. So
I like it. I think I have a similar story. It just is kind of a similar story. I learned about Lovecraft in high school. So I graduated 2009, and I kind of went dormant between then until a little bit after college. So like maybe 2014.
Sure.
Was, the the first time I kind of looked back into him. And I remember kind of having this struggle with myself, because when I was in high school, I was known as the church boy, the religious boy, that guy, I thought maybe I wanted to go to seminary. So like, that's the kind of,
sure.
That's the kind of thing I was dealing with. And, I would never be accepted into seminary now. I'm way too radical. But, I remember like reading it, and I remember going, is this something that I should be reading? And there was two reasons. I was like, is this something I should be reading? Because my mom wouldn't let me read Harry Potter. So I'm like, is this something I should know?
Yeah.
And then also, there's a lot of language in it that is not kosher these days. And a lot of themes that he deals with.
Yeah.
And I'm like, does this make me a bad person if I want to like this? So then I kind of put it down and I put it away. And Lovecraft was never brought up in college. Like, I brought him up once in philosophy class, and my philosopher professor was like, we don't talk about him.
All right.
He was an interesting guy, but it was Eldritch Horror that got me back into Lovecraft, because when I was living down in Pennsylvania, I had a group of friends who loved to play, the Fantasy Flight Cthulhu stuff, and the first game I was introduced to with that was Eldritch Horror, and I was like, this is Lovecraft? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, Lovecraft can be fun, it doesn't have to be racism and stuff. And they're like, no.
Yeah.
So I think what I really like about the Cthulhu mythos is that he's inspired so many writers and so many creators that, like, honor the original content, understand that it was written in a completely different time, but you can enjoy the contemporary works that are written with a little bit more civility to it.
Yes, yeah, I agree. I struggled with that actually for a while too. Just knowing that I was, and this was more recent, obviously, after I'd kind of like developed my love for Lovecraftian horror. It was a little hard for me at first, just in this day and age, to say to myself, like, yeah, I really love this guy's work, but he is just was a horrific racist, and
Yeah.
a xenophobe and stuff. But I did learn quite a bit actually in over just the last year about Lovecraft and like his upbringing, and a lot of the way he was I'm not excusing anything that he did, wrote, said, any of that. I want to be very, very clear. There's no excuse for it, no matter what. But um, I just learned a lot about how he was brought up, how his parents were very xenophobic, even for the time,
Yeah.
and that his whole like fear of the unknown um, kind of premise for all of his writing stemmed out of his actual fear of the unknown, because he just did not go out into the world until much later in his life.
Yeah.
So um, it's a little more understandable why he wrote the way he did. Still inexcusable, and I agree with
Exactly.
you that I think he collaborated with so many other people, wrote so many letters, and had an open call for people of his time to contribute to the mythos that he had created, and said, write what you want. And most other people didn't include any of the racist stuff. So
Yeah.
it's very easy to latch onto anything mythos related and not have to celebrate Lovecraft as a man. You
Yeah.
can just appreciate the work. So
I'm not a
I've kind of come to grips with that now.
Yeah, I'm not like a therapist or psychiatrist, but he had some. For those of you who don't know, Lovecraft had a lot of childhood trauma, and
Yes.
it came out in
Yes,
his
to put it
writings.
mildly. Yes. Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
So for the Eldritch Hour, what made you? And I guess you could say this about any of the games that you like to run with Call of Cthulhu. What made Call of Cthulhu your like go-to gaming system?
It was so I had a lot of friends who liked D&D. Obviously, it's the most popular system out there, has been almost since its inception. But I never really got to play in D&D. Spoilers, I'm going to play my very first ever Dungeons and Dragons session in like 3 weeks or something.
Ooh.
3 or 4 weeks. Yeah. I've listened to a lot of actual plays. I've watched content. I've read some of the manuals and stuff. So I'm not like completely jumping in head first with not knowing at all anything about D&D. But
Yeah.
so I knew quite a bit about D&D, even though I hadn't played it. And it's fine. I think as a system, it's totally cool. But fantasy as a genre never really, like, I love Lord of the Rings, and that's obviously was the stepping stone for D&D. But like outside of that, and like a select few other things out there, like maybe Dark Souls and things like that, I don't latch onto fantasy that much. I think it's very cool, but it's just my least favorite of fictional genres. So enjoying horror as much as I do in almost all of its facets, it was very easy for me to gravitate towards something like Call of Cthulhu. And it was actually because of another actual play podcast that I even decided I wanted to play Call of Cthulhu or run it.
Okay.
So I listened to pretty avidly How We Roll podcast. So there's a shout out. And they inspired me pretty heavily to want to GM or keep for Call of Cthulhu, and tried it. I just did a little one shot with some of my friends, kind of dabbled my toes into the rules, and I just fell in love right away. And so when I decided I kind of wanted to do an actual play podcast, because after that I had read some other systems and done a couple one shots and things again, and but I pretty much in my bones just always want to play Call of Cthulhu at any given moment. So it was pretty easy for me to select that for the podcast at the very least. And it's certainly the system I play most often, even in my off time. So
I'm going to throw two curveball questions that I didn't preload you with, so get ready to
cool.
answer off.
Yeah, shoot.
What is something from the Call of Cthulhu system that you think makes it unique and perfect for the kind of game style that you want to run with it?
That is a good question. I think my favorite thing about Call of Cthulhu, just overall, so I think that would apply to answer this question, is that it is very narrative driven, right?
Yeah.
The game is largely in the mechanics of it is very keeper facing. The
Hmm.
players don't have to remember a lot of rules.
Yeah.
You know, you just need to know how to make skill checks. The keeper is going to do everything else for you. So it allows you to role play. It really allows you to get into your characters, really help build the story, build the atmosphere.
Yeah.
And for me specifically, wanting to play a lot of horror and just consume horror media, like it really allows you to create a good horror atmosphere because the players as a group can create that tension and keep that tension going without having to stop to think about the math, right?
Hmm.
Like a lot of systems can get really crunchy, and I'm all for, you know, plugging the numbers and like playing the odds and things like that, but it can take you out of the experience for a moment, right?
Oh
Like
yeah.
there's the D&D sessions, it's famous for having like, well, we're gonna meet this week, but it's only gonna be this one combat, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know, and Call of Cthulhu is not like that at all. It's so narrative driven and allows for so much loose play and a lot of interplay between the players and the keeper, and I think that's um, largely based to the fact that it's just not a crunchy system. There's just not a lot of math involved, and I think it's one of its strongest suits.
I agree. The character sheet can sometimes look intimidating to people because they look at all those numbers and it's like, no, it's really not that bad.
Yeah.
It's,
Right. Yeah.
it's,
Yeah. The first time I handed it to people, they were like, "Oh man, look at all these all these skills. I have all these skills." And I was like, "Yes, but you only have points in like 10 of them.
yeah. Don't worry
You're
about
really
them.
only going to be rolling like 4 of them a game." Like,
Yeah.
you know
If
what I mean?
that.
So
So
yeah. So like we just had a session the other day for the podcast recording, and one of my players commented at the end. He's like, "I had 1 skill roll that whole game." You know, and
yeah,
but that's okay because that means the rest of it was all storytelling. And
exactly.
I think that's the magic of the system. So yeah.
I think that what I really like that's unique about Call of Cthulhu, the system, they have Chaosium. I think they might do this in like their other, was it the RuneQuest? I think they might have a similar to this. I never played RuneQuest. Is
I
luck.
haven't either.
Just because I like the
yes.
idea of having luck. And literally your luck is running out as you are playing. You know?
Yeah.
And I like that you can spend it, but it's like, but I need to keep it. And I need to spend it.
Mhm. There are you hit the nail on the head there. There's not only just about luck, but specifically about a number of the stats or attributes for a character help facilitate the tension that the game wants to create, right? Like you have luck and it's a spendable resource. So there's a tense moment when you say, as a keeper, would you like to spend luck to make that a success? Well, now they're like, oh, I'm down to like 20 out of 60. Like, I might need that really bad later. This isn't even a huge moment, but like, I really want to know what's behind that door before I go in. So like, I'm going to spend the luck, you know, or you have like insanity, and where they can just literally feel it going down throughout the game, right? In just little tiny chunks, sometimes bigger chunks, and that's fun because that creates the big bout of madness moments. But like, there's mechanics in the system that are inherently creating tension for the atmosphere of the game. That is really cool.
Yeah, definitely, and that's why I think Call of Cthulhu does it the best. I've played 10 Candles. I do like 10 Candles, but that's also a
I
horror
want to play
game.
10 Candles.
I
want to play it. I've never played, but I've heard about it, and I love the concept.
It's definitely not something that we could play on Tabletop Sim, unfortunately. We would have to play IRL.
Yeah.
To make it actually work.
Yeah.
But my second curveball question is, on a scale of 1 to 10, you know, I would probably assume that Call of Cthulhu... Let's just say that Call of Cthulhu is a 10 for you, okay? Where does Pulp Cthulhu fall on that for you?
Ooh. I would put it at a very solid 9.
Okay.
I think I prefer... I guess I should say exclusively as a keeper, I prefer classic over pulp, because I like, again, that really tight tension that and lethality that comes along with classic. I know for a fact that my non-podcast campaign players love pulp more than classic because they get to actually do things that they wouldn't normally do in classic. There's some survivability built in. It's a little bit more over the top.
It's more like a comic.
Can have some nice, yeah, right. It has some action sequences and stuff, and that is very cool. I think what I like about Pulp is that it actually makes me feel like I'm in the events of the Fantasy Flight Arkham series games, right? Those games are very pulpy, right? There's action. You're able to kind of just take on the mythos monsters. Often it's very hard still, but you can do it, right? It's not an impossibility. Whereas in classic Call of Cthulhu, it's kind of an impossibility in most cases. You're much better off running or hiding or coming up with a different plan than just facing it head on. So, yeah.
Okay, sort of not off the rails here, but running a campaign set in Arkham with Pulp Cthulhu, but then Arkham, like, everyone disappears, and you have to come back with the, like, standard Call of Cthulhu players and try to figure out. They're not like the people who are, like, they're super smart, but they're not, like, genetically modified or something. Maybe it was the government or something that like helped them become more like the pulp characters, and then the regular characters are sent in afterwards to figure out what happened to them all.
Right. That would be cool. That could be cool. Very cool. Yeah. I would love to run a pulp campaign set in the Fantasy Flight Arkham Horror universe sometime.
Oh yeah. I want to be Jenny Barnes.
I think that would be really cool. Heck yeah, dude. Yeah.
I think everybody wants to be Jenny Barnes. So what is... Let's say that somebody has learned about Call of Cthulhu, and they're like, I have joined... I've said yes to a game to see what it was like. What is one piece of advice that you would give a newer player to Call of Cthulhu?
I would say be willing to kind of go with the flow. As like kind of cliche as that sounds, but like just be very open to the experience and like what your keeper's trying to provide for you. Try to run with that. Don't be shy about obviously throwing out your own ideas or like doing what you want to do with your character. But I think at all times, keep in mind that the game is meant to create a certain atmosphere, right? So the number one piece of advice I would say is go with the flow, but try to keep that atmosphere and that tension up because, and I'm not saying don't laugh, right? Like don't have fun or crack jokes because horror and comedy go hand in hand. They're great bedfellows. So, and nothing's going to break that tension or like at least unscrew the lid of the jar for a moment than a good laugh, right? You got to let your players release tension. But try your best as a player to really get into it because the more that everybody at the table is into creating that atmosphere, the cooler the experience is going to be. And it's going to make you want to come back.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I really like, that's a good answer. I think my answer to that question would be to flip over your character sheet and role play and not role play.
That's a good one. That's almost universal.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I just think it works much better. I mean, I think it's much more crucial in my opinion in Call of Cthulhu.
I don't disagree, and I think kind of your answer then really goes hand in hand with mine. Just that idea of get yourself into the story. Think about what's happening and like just roll with that, and don't concern yourself with, well, I really don't want to go investigate this thing because my spot hidden's only like 10%. Like don't think about the numbers the whole time. Just play the game. Just have fun, tell the story with your friends. If something comes up and your keeper wants you to roll a dice doesn't matter what you have in it. That's what's going to create those moments. It's like, oh no, I only have 10%. I hope I get there, like, and that helps build that tension up. And then, then if you get it, you're like, yeah, we're going to do it. And then you die, or you don't, and then you get to do something else. But like, yeah, I think that's really good advice. Yeah. Flip the sheet over. And instead of looking at all those numbers, look at what you wrote for your backstory. Get into the head of your character. Yeah. Like really just feel the experience happening around you, because that's the best part about this game.
How about new keepers? What's a piece of advice that you would give new keepers?
My piece of advice for keepers is almost exactly the same, and but just a little bit of different wording. Listen to your players. Really listen to what they're saying they want to do, or listen to the crazy theories they're coming up with about the thing that you've presented them with, because they may take a clue that you've given them or a dialogue that you had as an NPC with one of them, and they're going to think about something completely different than what you had planned. But that's totally okay. Just go with it. And if you really need to get them a certain piece of information, wedge it in there somewhere else. Like, just find another spot in the story to give it to them. Find another way to literally have an NPC just hand it to them as a piece of paper. Like, somebody runs up to them in the rain and says, meet me at this place at midnight or whatever. Like, they're gonna be like, what? Huh? And then the guy's gone, but now they're back to where you want them to be. But you've let them tell their own story up to that point. Just listen to your players. Listen to what they're thinking about, what they're talking about. And when they ask you for questions or ask you, is it okay to do something? Try and accommodate that. Because again, it's a collaborative experience, and the story's only going to be good if everybody gets to contribute.
Exactly. So. Yeah, I was fighting with myself on what would be the right answer for me to say, because normally I would say, give handouts, but I felt like I think that's still a really good thing. Like. But if I had to choose one piece of advice, my piece of advice would probably be, don't worry if your players have read Lovecraft. Like, don't be hesitant to run the game if they know what Amigo is. It's still going to scare the crap out of them when there's 3 of them chasing them.
Well, and if your players, part of that onus will be on your players too. Like, it's part of that social contract that they are expected, whether or not they think they know what's going on, to still role play what their character would do, not what they know as a player. So, and I think that's great advice.
In the monster section and in the magic section of the Call of Cthulhu Keeper book, it just says, don't worry about if players know if they're Lovecraft. Just change it. Just change a stat on the fly if you have to freak them out. And they tell you to change it. They're like, don't let them know. Change it all the time so that they're always wondering what the heck they're fighting.
Yeah. And I think, going along with that, like, if you are worried about it, find new ways to describe things, right? Like, it's still a deep one. Of course it is, right? Like, deep ones are everywhere in Lovecraft, but it doesn't have to be fish man. It could be a crab man. It could be like a shrimp man. It could be half octopus, half lobster. Who knows? Describe different things about the fish man before you say it's a guy with a fish for a face that you're looking at. Just find new and unique ways each time to describe the same thing, because it'll always keep your players on your toes. And even if they know what a deep one is, they're not going to know what it is until it's slashing them in the face. So
exactly. Gotta love it. Where can our viewers find your podcast, other than that one link that I'm sending them to? How can they listen to it?
You can find us on quite literally any of your favorite podcasting platforms. So we are on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Podcast Addict, Spotify, you name it, we're probably on it. We do have a website, theeldritchhour.com. If you would like to, this is my sales pitch here. If you'd like to leave us a review, please do so. It's one of the biggest ways that the podcast can grow. We are still very new. And I would love to just contribute more to this community and have more people collaborate with us and learn about us and share stories with us. So if you want to leave a review or rating, that'd be awesome. But you can also follow us on Twitter at the Eldritch Hour. So I'm the person who solely runs it. So if you want to talk straight to me, that's the best way to find me. So.
And fun fact for any of you who watched our 9 p.m. to Philly game, not that I didn't want to ask Swifty, but you were actually the first person I asked to play, but you could show up that night, and Swifty jumped in.
Yeah.
So they know each other.
Yes, yeah, we do.
Because he's drinking from his coffee mug. Plug your other thing.
I may be drinking from a mug with my own Twitch channel's logo on it. Who is this egomaniac you've gotten on your show, Justin?
Hey, that's how I found you guys.
No, I am part of a absolutely wonderful group of people who like to play board games a lot. And we do it live on Twitch every Tuesday. We're called Cardboard on Tap. So if you want to search us up, every Tuesday at 5 p.m. Central, we are playing something board game related. Currently, it's been exclusively on Tabletop Simulator. Thanks, COVID, for nothing. But yeah, we've had some other like days where we stream stuff occasionally, and we're always thinking about new ideas. But currently, the Tuesday night thing has been constant. I'm just going to keep plugging away if you don't mind, because I've got one more thing. So
sure, go for it.
If you don't have enough of me podcasting in your life, I have another one that I run with my good friend Joey, who, if you go listen to the Eldritch Hour, you will hear his dulcet tones as one of my players. But he and I have another podcast called The Void Stares Back, where we talk about Eldritch and cosmic horror media. Just movies, fiction, that kind of stuff. The general premise is that we watch something together on the couch and then hit record the moment the credits roll, and whatever conversation comes right after that is what you get to hear. So if you fancy just some good old-fashioned, very casual, unprofessional discussion about Lovecraftian stuff, check that out too. voidstaresback.com. We have Twitter, and we're on every other podcasting platform there as well. We took a hiatus, so there hasn't been new content for some time, but we are, as I speak, churning out ideas to get back rolling. So that is not a dead thing. So
awesome,
because even death may die.
Well, on that bombshell,
yeah.
I thank you guys all for watching. Again, all of his stuff will be in the pinned comment and in the description. Make sure to go check out Josh at the Eldritch Hour and at the Void Stares Back and at Cardboard on Tap. Also at the World Strongman competition and the Viking beard growing competition. You know, all that stuff that he's in. I thank you guys very much for watching. Thank you, Josh, for being a esteemed guest. You're actually our first guest.
Thank you so much. Really?
Yeah,
oh, well,
you're our first guest.
I'm very humbled. Very humbled. No, seriously, Justin, thank you so much for asking me to do this. It's been awesome chatting with you. So,
awesome.
I really
so
appreciate it.
Coming. I thank you guys all for watching. I hope you guys all stay safe and stay warm, and remember to game on.
Thank you.